The lock turned, not with hesitation, just a rotation of metal against metal, the tumblers falling into place with a soft click that echoed louder than it should. Ip Man's hand lingered on the key before he withdrew it and slipped it into his pocket. Then he turned to face the room. 5 people stood against the walls. They had been summoned before dawn, told to arrive separately, instructed to tell no one. Each was a senior student, trusted, disciplined. Their faces showed nothing, just the stillness that comes from years of training under a master who values restraint above all else. In the center of the room stood Bruce Lee. He was 22 years old. His body was lean and coiled, every muscle visible beneath the thin white shirt. His feet were bare on the wooden floor. His hands hung loose at his sides, but tension lived in his shoulders, in the set of his jaw. Not fear, hunger, the kind that cannot be satisfied with words or forms alone. Ip Man walked slowly to the center. He was 60 years old, but moved like water, each step deliberate and economical. He wore his usual black Changshan, buttoned to the collar. His face was calm. He stopped 3 meters from Bruce and studied him for a long moment. "You asked to be tested," Ip Man said quietly. "I have locked the door. No one enters, no one leaves. Whatever happens here stays here." Bruce nodded once. His eyes never left his teacher's face. "Do you understand why?" "Yes, Sifu." "Tell me." Bruce's jaw tightened. "Because what you're about to show me is not for public eyes. Because this is not about pride or reputation. This is about truth." Ip Man's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Good, then we begin." He raised his hands into the Wing Chun guard position, center line protected, elbows tucked, fingers relaxed. He simply stood there, waiting as if he had all the time in the world. Bruce shifted his weight onto the balls of his feet. His lead hand came forward, his backhand chambered near his ribs. He had modified his stance over the years, widened it, made it more mobile, but the foundation was still there, still Wing Chun. The 5 witnesses pressed their backs against the walls. This was not a demonstration. This was something raw and necessary, a reckoning. Bruce moved first. A quick jab toward Ip Man's face, testing distance, testing reaction time. Fast, sharp, the kind of strike that had surprised many opponents. Ip Man's hand rose in a gentle arc, redirecting it 3 inches to the side. No force, no clash. The strike passed harmlessly by his ear. Bruce reset. Low kick toward Ip Man's lead leg, trying to disrupt his base, but Ip Man had already shifted his weight, turning his shin to absorb the impact. The kick landed, but achieved nothing. No buckle in the knee, no shift and balance. Bruce pressed forward. Jab, cross, hook, low kick, spinning back fist. His combinations were fluid and relentless, each technique flowing into the next. His speed was impressive, his precision undeniable. Every strike was aimed with specific intent, but nothing landed clean. Ip Man moved like smoke. Every deflection was minimal, every step measured. He gave ground when necessary, then reclaimed it between Bruce's breaths. His hands were always there, always redirecting without blocking. He did not counter, he did not attack, he simply made Bruce's offense irrelevant. 30 seconds passed. Bruce's breathing deepened, not from exhaustion, from the realization that nothing he threw was reaching its target. Ip Man's face remained calm, his breathing unchanged. Bruce changed approach. He slowed down, stopped trying to overwhelm. Instead, he began to feel for openings, to test reactions, to look for patterns. Ip Man allowed it. He let Bruce probe and search. His expression gave nothing away. He was a mirror reflecting back every question without providing answers. Then, without warning, Ip Man moved forward. 1 step, his lead hand extended in a straight punch toward Bruce's chest. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable. Bruce saw it coming. His hand came up to deflect, exactly as he had been taught years ago. But Ip Man's hand was no longer there. It had changed angle mid-motion, slipping under Bruce's deflection like water finding a crock.
The knuckles touched Bruce's sternum, light as a feather but precise as a blade. Then Ip Man's other hand controlled Bruce's arm. His leg swept forward, hooking behind Bruce's ankle. Bruce felt his balance shift. He tried to recover, but Ip Man's position was already inside his, controlling his center, redirecting his weight. There was no force, no aggression, just geometry and timing and an understanding of leverage that transcended technique. Bruce's back touched the floor. Gently, almost kindly, the way you might lower something fragile, but he was down, and Ip Man was standing over him, one hand still extended, palm open. The room was absolutely silent. Ip Man stepped back. He lowered his hands. Bruce lay on the floor for 3 seconds, processing, analyzing, understanding. Then he rolled smoothly to his feet. His face was flushed, not with shame, with revelation. He bowed, deep, held for 5 full seconds. "Thank you, Sifu." Ip Man inclined his head. "You are fast, you are strong, your techniques are sharp." Bruce waited. He knew there was more. "But you are still fighting to win." The words hung in the air like smoke. When you fight to win, you can lose. When you fight to understand, you cannot be defeated. Do you know why? Bruce shook his head slowly. Because understanding has no opponent. Victory has an opponent. Defeat has an opponent. But understanding stands alone. It does not need to prove itself. It simply is. Ip Man walked to the window. Morning light filtered through the shutters, casting thin lines of gold across the floor. "You came here wanting to know if you had surpassed me," he said quietly. "That is the wrong question. The right question is whether you have surpassed yourself, whether you have let go of the need to surpass anyone at all." Bruce stood very still. Something in his chest was shifting, breaking apart and reforming into a different shape. He had come here with confidence, with skill. But in 90 seconds, Ip Man had shown him how much further he had to go. Not in technique, in understanding. "When I moved," he said slowly, "you were already there. Before I committed, before I finished the motion. How?"
"I was not reacting to your movement," Ip Man said. "I was feeling your intention. Your body tells me what it will do before it does it. A shift in weight, a change in breathing, a tension in the shoulder. These things speak louder than the strike itself." He turned from the window and looked at Bruce with an expression that might have been sadness or might have been pride. "You are trying to be fast, trying to be clever, trying to find the perfect technique. But technique is a cage, speed is a cage, even skill is a cage. Water does not try, it simply flows. When you can stop trying, you will become what you are meant to be." Bruce bowed again, lower this time. When he straightened, his eyes were different, quieter, less hungry, more open. Ip Man walked to the door and removed the key from his pocket. He unlocked it with the same deliberate care. The mechanism clicked open. He pushed the door wide, and cool morning air swept into the room, carrying the smell of dew and wood smoke. "You may leave," he said to the 5 witnesses. "Remember what you saw here, but do not speak of it. Not today, not for many years. Some lessons are too important to be cheapened with words." The 5 students bowed to both masters and filed out silently. Each carried something heavy in their chest. They had witnessed something rare, something secret, a moment when pride met humility and learned to bend. When they had gone, Ip Man turned back to Bruce. "You will be great," he said with certainty. "Greater than me, perhaps, but not because you are faster or stronger, because you are willing to fall. That is the difference between a fighter and a master. A fighter avoids falling. A master learns from it." Bruce's throat was tight. He tried to speak, but found he had no words adequate for what he was feeling. Ip Man smiled slightly. "Go now. Train. Think. Let this settle into your bones. When you are ready, come back. I will still be here." Bruce bowed one final time and walked to the door. He paused in the threshold, looking back at the empty room, at the spot on the floor where he had fallen, at his teacher standing by the window. "Sifu,"
he said quietly. That question, whether I was fighting to win or fighting to understand, I think I finally understand what you meant. Ip Man did not turn around. Good. Now spend the next 10 years proving it to yourself. Bruce stepped out into the morning. The door closed behind him with the same soft click. He walked through the streets of Foshan as the sun rose, his mind replaying every moment. Not the techniques, not the speed or timing, but the feeling, the sensation of being completely controlled without ever being hurt. The realization that everything he thought he knew was just the surface of something deeper. Years later, Bruce Lee would create Jeet Kune Do. He would teach about formlessness, about adaptation, about being like water. He would become famous. He would inspire millions. He would change the way the world thought about martial arts and philosophy and human potential. But he would never forget that morning in Foshan. He would never forget the sound of the lock turning, the weight of the silence, the 5 witnesses standing against the walls, the way Ip Man had moved, not with force, but with understanding, not with aggression, but with inevitability. He would never forget the question his teacher had asked, with his hands instead of his words. Can you let go? Can you stop trying to win? Can you surrender to the flow? The answer, he discovered over time, was something you could not speak. It was something you had to become. The 5 witnesses kept their silence for decades. Some became teachers themselves, but none ever spoke publicly about what they saw that morning. Not because they were afraid, not because of some formal oath, but because they understood that some truths are too important to be shouted with words, some lessons too sacred to be turned into entertaining stories. Years after Bruce Lee's death, when he had become a legend and his philosophy had spread across the world, one of those witnesses was asked if the stories about Bruce's training with Ip Man were true. The old student smiled and looked away into the distance. I saw him fall once, and I saw him stand back up wiser than he was before. That is all anyone needs to know about his training. The questioner pressed for more details, asked about techniques, about conflicts, about the dramatic stories that circulated among martial arts enthusiasts, but the old student simply shook his head. Some things are not meant to be shared, some moments too important to be reduced to anecdotes. If you want to understand Bruce Lee and Ip Man, do not ask me about what happened. Ask yourself what you would do if your teacher locked the door and asked you to show him everything you had learned. That was all he would say, and it was enough. The door had been locked. 5 people had remained inside. A question had been asked and answered without words, and somewhere in that locked room, in the space between action and understanding, a legend had been born. Not from victory, not from dominance, but from the willingness to fall and the wisdom to learn from falling. Ip Man gave Bruce Lee a gift that morning. Not technique, not skill, but perspective. The understanding that true mastery is not about defeating opponents. It is about becoming so complete in yourself that winning and losing become irrelevant. Bruce carried that gift with him for the rest of his life. It shaped his philosophy. It informed his teaching. It made him not just a great martial artist, but a great thinker, a great teacher, a great human being. And it all began with a locked door, 5 silent witnesses, and a master who cared enough to show his student the truth, even when the truth was humbling. That morning in Foshan, Ip Man tested Bruce Lee. Not his technique, not his speed, not his power. He tested his character, his willingness to learn, his capacity for growth. And Bruce Lee passed that test, not by winning, but by losing with grace, by falling with dignity, by standing back up and bowing deeper than before. The door was locked, the question was asked, the answer was found, and when the door opened again, everything had changed.